Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to my Thursday live stream where we talk about photography and I answer any questions you might have about photography and Olympus or OM system cameras. I always do my best, and also I like to catch up and see how everybody's doing. I hope everyone's doing well. Things are going pretty good over here. I'm just fighting my allergies with, so if you see my eyes like a little red or tearing, I don't know why today, because summertime is usually not so bad, but I take all my usual allergy medicines, but it's still a problem. And not that anybody really cares about that, but I'm trying to do a lot of self-portraits, practicing portrait photography and maybe getting into sort of like what what's her name did. Gosh, I can't remember her name. But they found a box of her film, and she didn't. Oh, gosh, why is that name escape me all of a sudden? Because I wasn't planning on talking about her, but when I was thinking about doing self-portraits, I was thinking about her. She had passed away, and then somebody found a box of undeveloped film, and that's how she kind of got discovered. And man, I tell you, this my memory is just not what it used to be. It's funny how you can just remember some things vividly than other things that just are totally gone. It just doesn't make any sense how the brain works. Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe I need some more coffee, get the cylinders firing. But anyhow, let me check. Yeah, everything looks good. I hope everybody can see and hear me okay. For the most part, I think I've nixed the audio video problems. And hopefully today, for those of you that are younger, I don't know, there may not be a single young person in the audience, meaning under the age of 50. Let's even go under the age of 25. But, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about how I thought I corrected that high-pitched noise sound. And for whatever reason, in that particular live stream, somebody could still hear it. Now I have for whatever reason, the filter was not on or active, but now I have that notch filter turned back on, and hopefully that high-pitched sound is gone. So I want to, if anybody can chime in on that either now or in the comments later after the stream, if you hear it, let me know. But it's specifically, it's at 12,000 hertz. So I blocked everything from about 11,000 hertz on up. In terms of the notch filter, I just, because the human voice doesn't go that high, at least not mine, right? Anyway, let me check in who's here. Let me pull up the chat section. And oh my goodness, let's see. We have David, John, Randy. I think Randy, you said you were going to head out, check out some flooded roads. And David Tellick, good to see you. Lassie, Seraphin, John. And thanks to everyone that this week has been sending me emails about, giving me a lot of great ideas about how to kind of break through this little rut that I'm going through in my photography. And I hate to call it a rut. It's not really a rut. I mean, I still love going out and taking pictures of anything. I yearn to go out and take pictures, but I get stuck in my house sometimes doing stuff. But, I try to take every opportunity to go out and photograph. I just love it, right? So no worries there. But it's more of a plateau that I've been talking about the last couple of weeks, about just not being able to break through this sort of, I guess, and start getting images that I really like or have a reason to like even a little bit. Because a lot of pictures I take, they're fine, right? They're okay. I mean, I get plenty of likes and compliments, and a lot of you really like some of the stuff I do. But from a personal standpoint, I look at them and I'm just like, these are the same pictures I could have took, 8 or 9 years ago. And of course, my skill set's improved a lot, so I can do a little bit more stuff than I could, 8 or 9 years ago, right? But ultimately, for general photography, when I go on my photo walks, um, I'm not content anymore with my level of imagery and, creatively speaking. So, because, I have the basic skill set, right? I think we all do. And I got a lot of emails, people telling me that they also, when they hit a rut or they hit this plateau, I got a lot of great ideas to sort of break through. And these are things that just are not in my normal workflow, that I'll have to schedule, at least try to schedule, once a week, once a month, something. I need to dedicate some time to practicing these methods you guys suggested. And most of it's about observing emotion in the scene and understanding or getting a feel for the scene, right? Because that's definitely something that I feel like is lacking in my photography. It's very sterile, very clinical. You can look at almost any photo I take, and you can say, oh, well, he applied rule of thirds here, added leading lines, did a limited color palette. It's sort of like that, right? Frame within a frame, or sunset, long shadows, the usual tropes that you find in photography that can create very, very beautiful images. But I'm not looking for beauty or perfection so much, or even that epic photo. I'm just looking for photos that uh, convey some kind of emotion or feeling or mood. And that's a little different, I think, than just telling a story like journalistic photography. It's all about the story. Rules and composition be damned. If there's an interesting story in the image, you can kind of get away with being, a journalist or journalistic type photography. And the story sometimes can convey that feeling or mood. But, how do you do that without words? Because I can show a picture, for example, of me petting my dog or just holding, I've done this before where there's a few images I really like as a set. And if I tell the story behind the set, then the pictures suddenly have some meaning. But they wouldn't have meaning otherwise than someone other than myself if I didn't tell you what the story was, right? And storytelling without words can be very difficult, but storytelling with emotion and feeling is, I think that's where I need to be. And I've been accused of being very robotic, without feeling or emotion in my personal life. And of course, that's an exaggeration, right? But because I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry. There's lots of emotions flying around. But doing that in photographies can be difficult. So a lot of the exercises, not a lot, but some of them were about attempting to try to capture that mood or feeling of a scene. And it really takes a lot of time. It involves sitting around and watching the scene at different times of the day, what kind of activities going on, different light, different seasons, maybe if it's, if you go back to the same spot over and over again. And that's when you start to really be able to capture I think, or you should be able to see or get some sense of feeling or emotion, closing your eyes and appreciating the environment using your other senses, and then opening your eyes again to see if you can capture what you heard, what you smell, maybe, what you were feeling on your skin. I mean, these are all very difficult things for me because I've never done it before. When I go out and do photography, it's more for, and if you saw my last video, I'm very information orientated, right? What can I include in a scene that will provide information to give what I'm taking a picture of context? So if I take a picture of, I don't know, a trash can, what's the context? Is it a trash can in a park, in front of somebody's house, in the city? The trash can can have many different environments, and depending on the environment, you know what information can I include uh, that would add context to why is the trash can there. I mean, that's a basic example, because I've taken pictures of trash cans. I'm sure we all have, because they're just interesting subjects. You never know what you're going to find sticking out of a trash can sometimes, right? uh, and then depending where it is would even add more interest, like a juxtaposition, um, or just trash in general, right? Or junk. You see an old rusty car out in the middle of the woods. Like, how the hell did it get out there? Uh, Things like that, right? And they make for interesting photos, but they're not. I don't see how I would capture something like that emotionally or have feeling to it, whereas I know someone else could, right? Someone can. And but like I said, a lot of times it's about seeing things right in your own neighborhood, areas that you're familiar with and go to all the time, and then capturing the moments that are very maybe mundane to you, right, but very interesting to others. Like when I did my drive down into the rural parts of America. I think it was very interesting to me because I don't see that all the time, but to a lot of people in other countries that wouldn't see this kind of, uh, imagery anywhere else other than the U.S. And every country and every place has their I can't even pronounce that word, but have very distinct things about that place that you're not going to find anywhere else in the world. Uh, and it's fun to capture those things as a documentary type thing. But again, we go back to how do you capture that feeling or mood? And one of the photographers, and this is really interesting that so I've been looking at a lot of photographers, not a lot, but I'm starting to look into photographers, and I'm gathering a list of names. Like, I talked about Eggleston last week and how I liked a couple of the images there. And then this past few days, I've been watching Saul Leiter, right? Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. He passed away just not too long ago. I think, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. I can't remember exactly, but his work is in museums and galleries all over the world, right? And he's a very humble guy. I watch, because we were very fortunate that we could get interviews with him on video that we can watch on YouTube. And I'll point you to one that I thought was interesting. But he took pictures of mostly everything right on his own block or within a few blocks of where he lived in New York, which in it itself is a very interesting place to be, photographically speaking. And because he lived there and just took pictures around there, I think that's one of the things that allowed him to capture the feelings and moods and the kind of imagery that just knocks my socks off. And I can't put my finger on it. It's the way he composed things and the way the colors that are in the scene work together. And I mean, I don't want to. And the other thing I found interesting is even though they say he was a very opportunistic type photographer, like he didn't sit on the street for hours, right, looking for a scene to happen, but like I always say, luck favors the prepared. He's a very skilled photographer, has a very good eye, and when the scene comes, he's always ready to capture it, right? uh And what was more interesting, or I wouldn't say more interesting, but what was interesting was his first digital camera was an Olympus E1, as far as I can tell from one of the interviews. And I don't know if you guys remember the E-Volt E1. I think it was a 5 or 6 megapixel 4/3 camera. And he it was given to him by Olympus plus $10,000 to go out and shoot, right? I guess to get because he was very poor, meaning he wasn't making much money off his photography until he was discovered in the 90s. And that's when his career kind of took off. I forget how that happened exactly. I'd have to watch the interview again. But then in the 2000s, early 2000s, at some point, Olympus gave him a camera. And I saw a more recent picture of him, meaning, a few years after he got the Olympus camera. He was shooting with a Panasonic G1. So there was a period of time, at least, and he owned about, I think, 15 or 20 digital cameras. But I know 2 of them were Micro Four Thirds. And the first one being an Olympus, I thought was really interesting. So, again, it goes to show that the gear has got nothing to do with your photography with respect to, capturing or creating great photography, which we all know, right? Creating great photography has nothing really to do with the gear. It's all about the person. But he lived in his town and he captured things not every day, but he never left his house without a camera. And the other interesting thing was he shot mostly at 90 millimeters, 85, 90 millimeter equivalent, which would be like a 45 on a Micro Four Thirds system. So telephoto or mid telephoto range, right? So I thought that was interesting. He kind of liked that compression, and then of course he's known for reflections and color and the way his compositions are very non-traditional. So that there's a lot of things, and then there's people that called him brilliant, and he himself said that he was never a fan of like critics, right, in general, because defining art is always changing, right? What is good art? Because things come into favor, they go out of favor, then they come back, and the critics' opinions go with the flow, they ebb and flow, right? But I would argue to say that his work is going to be timeless, right? Because it really is something special, and he was a really interesting guy. Apparently, there's a movie about him that I want to watch. I think it's called In No Hurry or something. So that'll be interesting. And if you just do a YouTube search on Saul Leiter, you'll find a bunch of stuff on his work. But what's really disappointing is it's very hard to find, and I've yet to find it. If anybody can leave in the comment below, maybe afterwards, or if you can in the comments now, but it's harder for me to find things in the comments. If you can find any work that he's done with this digital camera, because he dropped film like this once he got that Olympus E-Volt, right? And he shot pretty much pure digital from there on out. That's the impression I get, right, from the videos that I've watched. And unfortunately, there's as a gear person, right, there's no video specifically about his gear that he used that I could find, because it was all about his photography. And you always see his iconic ones, the ones that get a lot of praise and appreciation. And most of that work was in the 50s and 60s, right, when he was shooting film. Maybe even the 70s, but a lot of the ones I saw were in the 50s and 60s. But I don't see a lot of work when he gets into the 80s, or any of his work, particularly when he's shooting with digital. and shooting with micro four thirds. Uh, that that is, I don't know why I can't find it now. The person that is in charge of the archive for Saul Leiter was a very close personal friend to him, and she said that they have put everything on a backup, right, digitally. And this was in 2013, I think, shortly after you passed away. I don't know where it stands now. I'll have to do some more research. Like I said, I'm just scratching the surface on this. But what was interesting is that he would fill up a memory card and then, keep all the photos on the memory card and just buy another memory card. He didn't like reformat the card and use it again or offload it to a computer. He just took the memory card out of the camera and bought another memory card. Uh, I guess back then, that's where his 10,000 bucks went, because memory cards weren't super cheap back in the early 2000s. And he had accumulated only, and I say only, but even if he had accumulated, apparently to her, 5,000 digital images. Which, some of us can do in a single photo walk, right? If we're doing sports action photography with the way cameras are today. But he accumulated about 5,000 digital images, and I haven't seen one digital image that he created, because she said that his style didn't change at all by changing gear, right? He was still Saul Leiter. He was still taking Saul Leiter pictures, regardless of format. But what Sal really liked, he did like technology and appreciate the engineering and craftsmanship of cameras. And, for example, slide film he thought was terrific, because he could take a picture, send it off to Kodak, they'd send it back to him, and he could just put it on a projector and show everybody, right? He didn't have to develop the negatives, because he developed a lot of his own prints. He didn't have to do that. He could just show it on a projector. He thought that was amazing. And digital cameras were the next step for him, because he would take a picture and he could just look at the back of the camera and see it right away. And he just loved that, so that was it was interesting to see, that he was not by choice, but by fortune of gift from Olympus to move into digital photography, because he didn't have the money to buy a digital camera at the time. But he got recognized somewhere, and they sent him one. So fascinating. Let me put a link to that video that I'm talking about, that I got most of this information from. I'll put this in the comments right now, and I'll just show you on the screen. This video here, 6 years ago, Margit Erb, director, Saul Leiter Foundation. So I might have to reach out to this if it still exists, and see if I can, where I can look at his work on digital cameras, because I would just be fascinated to see how the images look. From his, his digital work. I'd be very curious to see, because we all know it's very difficult to emulate film and that look that film gives. And I want to be able to subtract that equation, or that part of the equation, out of his images and look at the digital images and say, and because, they always in the back of my mind, is it just because it's on film that I like the colors? Is it, or is there more to it than that, right? So I'd be curious to see the digital work, so I can eliminate that from the formula, or keep it in. Maybe that's all it is. I don't, I seriously doubt it, but as I'm learning or trying to analyze things, because I watched a lot of other videos about people analyzing what he did, and it's very easy to analyze things after the fact, right? Um, so while I enjoy watching critiques of movies and even art and review of art, particularly Victorian art, you have to you have to understand that this was after the fact, right? In the US here, we call it Monday morning quarterbacking, right? What could we have done differently? What could we have done better? When you look at something, and why is it so great? Things like that, right? Because critiquing art, defining art, as Saul Leiter said, what is art? How do you define it? Because it changes over time. What is good art? What is bad art? It comes and goes. Uh, but you just, and he never he seemed like a very humble person, but he did recognize that he was good at what he did. Uh, and that's something that I'd like to be in that position where I can know that I'm good at what I do. There's, like my architectural work, commercial real estate, I'm pretty good at it. I have a very high level of confidence when I can go into any property and get something the client will appreciate. So commercially speaking, I can deliver those kinds of photography with a very high level of confidence that, it's going to meet the expectations of the client. But for my general photography and photo walks, man, it's not, like I said, I'm at this plateau, right? I just need to kind of break through. So let me go back to the chat. I kind of rambled on there for about 20 minutes, and I'm sure there's a lot of great feedback here in the forum or in the chat section. So Thomas Kale, good to see you. System Natura, Corey Cruz. Oh my goodness, Robin Wong, how are you? It's good to see you. I was just watching your video this morning on the 75 millimeter. That was a great video. I agree with everything you said. It was interesting how you ruled out the 40 to 150. I have to watch that part again because I was multitasking while I was watching it, right? Like making breakfast. I just ate, and I'm talking about breakfast made me hungry again. But but yeah, I mean, it's the key thing I took away from that, and it had nothing to do with the lens, right? Is don't worry about your settings so much once you start taking pictures. You have your settings set up, and then you just take the pictures. And don't worry about noise or ISO or things like that. Just have the camera set up that's appropriate for the kind of scene you're going to take, and then let the camera do the work, I guess. Andreas is here. Good to see you. Yeah, see, Louise is there. She knows. Louise, I'm sorry. I called you Louis. It's Louise. um, and David Crooks, oh my goodness. And then having a project, sure. I mean, that's crossed my mind, right? Having a project and going out. Roberto wants to climb a mountain. How you doing, Roberto? It's good to see you here. I know it's like what 12 midnight or something in Australia. Sis Natura said, "Oh my God, I need my glasses." You can easily get in the rut. I've been doing some work with macro now that it's very interesting subject, looking at all the types of lighting using 3 LED systems. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing a little bit of macro work lately. I'm going to be doing more in about a month or so, because I should be getting a macro lens. Finally, somebody's going to send me a lens. Man, it's like it's like pulling teeth sometimes to get people to send you stuff so you can review it for them. But finally, I'm getting some offers, right? Thanks to my friends and others that gave me some advice how to get some more products in. Uh, so I'll be getting a macro lens. Now it's not going to be for the Olympus system. They only make it for APS-C, so I have to do it on a Fuji. Fuji is the only APS-C mount that I have that's mirrorless. So it doesn't matter, right? I mean, I should be able to. Well, I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but it should be in about a month. I should have that lens. I'll do a photo walk with it, and then I'll do a review. And by photo walk, I mean that might even mean using it here in the office or in my studio, because sometimes macro work, the way this lens is made, it's probably more suited for studio type work. But we'll talk about that later. Corey Cruz at work. Okay. Cool. You caught a banana spider. I don't even know what that is, but that's cool. I was looking at whatchamacallit. I'll address this in it. I was looking at some photos that won awards, and I mean, they were fabulous photos, right? They captured some decisive moments, some very interesting creatures. A lot of it was wildlife photography, but some of it was street and artsy, creative stuff. But none of them really appealed to me, because they didn't really, to me, tell a story or have any feeling or emotion. And I'd look at it. I said, okay, this is a leading line shot. This is a long exposure shot. This is just a lighting with some smoke coming off a candle, or this is a close up of an eagle. There was just a lot of great photography that does. Some of it required a very high skill set to accomplish and capture, and some of the processing that was done, the post processing was really amazing. So I don't want to take away from the people that win awards for their photography. I mean, it's great when they do, but I feel like it's not photography that's going to make it into a museum or a gallery, right, of any consequence. Because there's a lot of local galleries where photographers are featured, and that's great. It's part of life, right? You want to have some recognition for the work that you're doing if you want to go after those kind of things, and be recognized for what you do. But for those really big ones that are curated by museums and large galleries and are featured, I didn't feel like these photographs kind of met that level of epicness. I don't know what to say. Because a lot of the photographs, I feel like a lot of the photography I look at, like I did that recent photo of Audrey Hepburn, right? And I tried to duplicate the lighting that Jack Carter did. See if I have that here, just so you guys know what I'm talking about. Oh, it's right here, but where's the... Click a button, Rob. Come on. All right, so here's a couple. This setup here. Um, Basically, I tried to duplicate this particular shot, and I shot in JPEG because I knew that this was a picture, I think, in the 50s, right, of Audrey Hepburn. And of course, she has makeup and all kinds of things on, but I think I got pretty close. And I forget what it's called. It's chiaroscuro or something, but it's basically where you do. I don't know if you can see the mouse, but it's light, dark, light, dark, right? This kind of composition with light. And I couldn't get my collar to stay up like hers, right? But that's fine. It wasn't really about the clothing or anything. But the key difference between mine and that one, photographically speaking, is my complexion is much darker, right, than hers. And it was harder for me to illuminate my face to the same level as her without blowing out the highlights on my shirt. Now, the highlights on her shirt are blown out as well, but not quite as much as mine. And on my right shoulder, the shadows aren't quite as dark as on hers. And again, I think that's because I had to push the light a little harder on my face because I have a darker complexion. But if I had Audrey Hepburn here in my house, I think I could have got this shot. And that's what I look at when I look at a lot of photography is, how did they take that shot? I look at it very carefully, where the light's coming from, whether it's a landscape like outdoors where it's all natural light, or if it's a studio shot like this, how can I accomplish this? And it took me a few hours to get this right. I tried a lot of different things, and ultimately, uh, I got pretty close. And my point here being that when I see a photograph of any consequence, like ones that won awards more recently, right? I look at it and say to myself, is this something I could do? And most of the time, I can say, yeah, I could probably do that if I was at that location. Uh, at the same time with that same photographer right next to me, I think I could have captured it. But I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, right? That's showing that I have a very high level of confidence in my skill set, that maybe I wouldn't be able to capture it right there, but with a little practice and guidance, I could easily capture a shot like that. But then when you look at shots from, like I'm talking about Saul Leiter today, Vivian Meyer, that's the other person. She did a lot of self portraits. I was thinking about maybe emulating that for a little while. Uh, those are shots that I don't think I could capture. If we walk side by side out in the street together, I guarantee, maybe not on one walk, but after maybe several walks, I wouldn't come up with one picture that would compare to anything that Saul Leiter would have taken. Um, and I don't know if I'm accurate in that assessment, right? Because you can't, I couldn't, he's passed away, so I couldn't possibly go on a photo walk with him. But that's the feeling I get, is that I'm just not anywhere near that kind of level. I don't have to be at that level to be happy, but I'd like to have at least a feeling that I'm getting there. I'm on the right path, whether it's, and in my own style. I don't want to just copy the greats like I did with this Audrey Hepburn shot. I was just doing a carbon copy of what Jack Cardiff did, right? There's a photo by Jack Cardiff, if I didn't mention his name. Another person I studied a few of the images. Now, another image that's very popular. Well, let me stop for a second before I go into that. Louisa said, Rob, do you find how you are feeling when you are out taking photos impacts your shooting? I find my mood plays a big part. If I am tired and decide to photograph, my mindset may not be the best. Yeah, definitely. Now, it's rare Because usually when I pick up a camera and go out and start shooting, I'm in a pretty good mood. If I was in a bad mood, the photography shutter therapy, as Robin Wong would call it, right? Shutter therapy. It gets me into a good mood. But there are times when I'll go out because there's a I go with David Crook's photo club. I try to go to every event if I can, and it the last two I've had a conflict with family events, but uh, I try to go out every week, right, with the photo club, if not twice a week when it's available. And because it's scheduled, there's no and I'm always looking forward to it, but then, sometimes you're having a rough day, but you want to go to this event because you're committed to it. And I commit when I make a commitment, I try to keep it. If not for myself, but a lot of times, people ask me for help when they're, when we're out in the field, or just like, we just like to hang out and have something to eat after the photo shoot. I mean, it's kind of a social / photography club type thing. But yeah, I'll go out and I'll just be in a mood. Like, I'm just not going to capture anything. I've been here 1,000 times, and what am I going to capture new? How do I make this interesting? You get lazy when you're not in a good mood. You don't try as hard. At least I don't. I don't try as hard when I'm not in a good mood. But usually I'm still enjoying my time. I would say 99.9% of the time I'm enjoying my time out shooting. But if I had a bad day or a rough, emotionally or mentally, I'm not there. Definitely, I don't try as hard. Because you lack that enthusiasm, right? And for me, just shooting kind of takes me out of that mood and puts me in a better mood at the very least. It's rare that I go out and I mean, I can't even think of a time I went out shooting and then came back home depressed. I'm always happy I went out shooting. Uh, I may not be happy with the images, right? I'll be like, oh, these images suck. What am I going to, I might not be happy with the images, but the time that I spent photographing was definitely enjoyable. And I take any opportunity I can to go out and shoot. And that's how I look at it. And Andrew says, I have an Olympus 30 millimeter macro. I hear that it's hard to work with because how close you have to get to the subject. I'm hoping to be able to get some good shots. Yes. The working distance is definitely much shorter. So that's, obviously that has, can cause problems with bugs flying away because you got too close to them and, or running off, right? And it also makes it a little more difficult with lighting. You'd have to have a pretty good diffuser setup or lighting setup so that the lens itself, the shadow of the lens, doesn't get into the shot. And you don't necessarily have to be using a flash. I mean, just even natural light, the shadow could be hitting the subject off the lens, or the shadow coming off the lens would be over the subject. And but I'm trying to remember Emily Talpin when we did a live photo chat. There were times when she preferred the 30 millimeter macro over the 60 macro, but I can't remember what the reasoning was. I don't shoot enough macro to be able to extrapolate what the reason was. It's something I'd have to memorize for now, right? And I can't remember it, unfortunately, what her reasoning was. It has a slightly more magnification, but that aside, I like the 30 macro because it's sort of a multi-purpose lens. You don't have to use it for macro. You can kind of use it for anything else, right? Because it's just a little bit tighter or a slightly telephoto over a standard 50 millimeter focal length. And that's why I would prefer the 30 macro over the 60 if I just wanted a one lens. But if I want to get into macro, I'll buy the 60. At this point, I'm still not hardcore in the macro. I mean, it's fun time to time, uh, but the work involved, oh my goodness, the work to find the bugs, that's the part that's a little bit daunting for me. Finding. I mean, how do people find these little jumping spiders? Ticks and mosquitoes, yeah, they're bound everywhere. But the more interesting bugs, these jumping spiders and like banana spiders or stuff, uh, I'm having a hard time finding. I found if you've seen my Instagram, I have a couple of spider shots and fly shots, and they're okay. You know, uh, I was just using an adapted Nikon lens to do it. I don't have a dedicated macro lens yet. I just adapt my Nikon macro lens, and that's good enough for now. If I find myself getting into it a lot more, I might buy a 60 macro. But right now, I have my eyes set on a couple of primes. The 25 millimeter 1.2 and the 45 millimeter 1.2, the pro lenses from Olympus. I kind of have my eyes set on those lenses right now. I was thinking about trading my EM1 Mark III to get that 25 because I have the OM1. I don't need the EM1 anymore. It'd almost be an even swap. Almost. I'm gonna try and work a deal where I can even swap my EM1 for that 25 millimeter, but we'll see. And oh, hey, Robin's gonna do a video, awesome, about conveying mood, expression, emotion, specifically for stage photography. The decisive moment matters. Awesome. Well, I'll definitely check that out. And for anybody that doesn't know by now, Robin Wong has his own YouTube channel. It's and he has a terrific channel, and I always call him the happiest photographer on earth because he smiles the whole time. I guarantee he's smiling right now, right? Like he just smiles 24/7, which is I just I really envy that. I wish I could smile 24/7. Most of the time I'm like this, just thinking about things, But Robin could be like, curing cancer and smiling, or contemplating quantum physics and smiling, like he could be contemplating the most deep things and still smile, whereas I'm like that, right? So that's how our personalities are a little bit different. Is Robin finds joy in everything. And George says, do you have any colleges nearby? Photograph where there are young, optimistic people. Their trash can wait. Actually, there's several schools in my area, and I have to give that some thought. I went to University of Maryland College Park here, and they have beautiful architecture there. I've thought about going there just to do some architectural photography, but since there's going to be students there, and they're all adults, right? So we kind of eliminate that one layer of objection, photographing kids, right? But generally speaking, architecturally speaking, there's a lot of interesting buildings there. And I drove by there about 10 years ago, and now the campus is gated with a guard. At least it was when I went there last, like 10 years ago. You couldn't just drive onto the campus like you used to. So I don't know if it's still just open to anybody to go in and they have a guard there for show or for additional security if something happens on the campus, but I would like to go back there and visit. Now, they didn't seal off everywhere because when I used to go there, I know all the different ways you can get onto the campus from other streets that are not on the campus, right? You can easily, there's trails and everything. I seriously thought they've blocked off all of those. But definitely for driving, you're not going to just pull in with your car without going through a gate. And that barrier may not be anything at all. It may be just you wave when you go by, right? Or maybe you show your ID, they scan it, then you go in. I don't know. I haven't tried, but that would be. I've thought about doing that. And also, there's several campuses that have no gates, right? You can just drive on. But the University of Maryland, I think, architecturally speaking, is the most interesting. They have really beautiful buildings there. And most of the other campuses, the buildings are okay. They're just very college building looking. They're not interesting like College Park. And Seraphim wanted the E1 so bad back then. Well, I'm way behind. I'm like a half hour behind on the chat. I'm sorry. I did jibber jabber for a long time. I was going to talk about another picture, wasn't I? This is a little bit different, this picture. And this is one of you guys sent to me. It was actually DeMorcan. DeMorcan is, he's professional photographer, also a professor of some sorts, but he teaches photography and makes a living off photography and has decades of experience. Like many of you, you have decades of experience. I have not been shooting a decade. 9 years. If I push it a little bit, 9 years, I've been shooting. Now, I did have a small window back in college, like for about a year, where I was kind of got into photography, but then nothing from college until about 9 years ago. Let me pull up one more video you guys should watch if you haven't seen it. I'm going to pull it up. Bear with me. The stream hasn't frozen. I'm just going through my history, which I would show you, except here it is. I watch a lot of scare cam videos, so if you saw my YouTube history, that's what you would see. Where's this one? So yeah, I watched a lot of these Saul Leiter videos. But this one here, and let me put a link to it. How do I skip this ad? But this was an interesting video. Dorothea Lang is the photographer, as you can see here, that took this picture, right? So, but as you can see in the comments here, it says, really appreciate it until you understand the 10 minutes that came before it, is what it says. And what they do in this video is they show you the progression of images leading up to this one that became, very famous. And the idea being is the process of coming up with the epic image, so to speak, or coming out with an image that you really can be proud of or has any consequence. You don't get it in the first shot. You have to try, several different things. And honestly, almost any one of the photos leading up to this one I thought were really good. But obviously, this is the one that got any recognition. And it was an interesting to see the process of getting to this image. So I've seen this video a long time ago. How old is this video? I probably saw it early on when it first came out. Yeah, it's been 3 years, at least 3 years, right? But this is a good video to watch. It's about the process of creating a great photo. And it doesn't matter what the subject is, the process is pretty much the same. So definitely watch that. Okay. Lauren is here. Good morning. Where is... Oh, wow. I have a fan from China. Hello. Hi, G. Good to meet you. And Saul Leiter shot digital on a Panasonic G6. Okay. In the two photos that I saw of digital cameras that I saw, one was a G1, the other one was the Olympus E1. And I saw another digital camera, but I couldn't recognize what make and model it was. It almost looked like a bridge camera to me because it had a very long, flash or hot shoe or prism on top. It was very long. And typically, the bridge cameras have that very long hot shoe on the top, right? Because it's a super zoom lens, usually on the bridge cameras. But it was probably a Panasonic also, though. But that's good to know. Okay, I'm just catching up on the chat. Yeah, I'm working through the videos on Saul Leiter. It's interesting. Lots of interesting stuff, and then I'm going to start looking into other. I mean, it's nice because Saul Leiter was alive, and a lot of he did some interviews that we can watch him live and hear it from his own mouth, rather than like the video link that I shared with you guys is after he's already passed, but it was the lecture was given by somebody that was very close to him, a close personal friend. And as much as as I mean, that's the best we're going to get for now, right? But it's not the same as hearing it from the artist's own mouth, own original words. Because whenever you interview someone, you have your own personal interpretations of what they're saying, and what you think they meant sometimes, right? Yeah, in no great hurry. That's right. Yeah, that's the one I'm going to watch. I'm going to have to find it. And Corey says, macro work has taught me to really be aware of the details of my environments, no matter where I am. I pay so much more attention. Yes. And that's the beauty of photography is you do become much more aware of your environment when you're walking around. And, things you just take for granted or never looked at twice, now you stop and say, wait, that's really interesting. Or why is that here? Or, where did this thing go? Well, it used to be here. You know what I mean? Or look how this has grown or how this has shrunk, right? Like for a lot of street photography, some cities just explode and become very vibrant and thriving. And then other times the town or city has gone down, right? The population has left. And, there's towns like that, right? Where a particular industry is gone. And what's left is, like, I guess coal mines. I guess there's some coal mining towns that are gone, but more representative would be like the gold rush, where the towns were very, bustling when there's gold there, right? But then when the gold or silver dried up, it was is a ghost town. And we have that in our modern times as well for different reasons. So that'd be things shrinking, but also things thriving. Like here where I live in this area, Northern Virginia is just thriving. I mean, you can't park your car without a building being planted on it the next day, you know. So you don't want to park overnight, trust me, in this area. But uh, yeah, it's grown, I think. in And for me, it's kind of sad because the a lot of the development, they have no sense of history or appreciation for history. They're looking at it commercially, trying to make that land commercially viable. History and environment be damned. And that's what happened to a lot of the marshlands here in the DC areas. They just got pummeled by concrete and buildings and stuff, and they're trying to revive what it's called the dike marsh, and they're doing a great job. The dike marsh is coming back, but a lot of the marshland is gone forever, and a lot of the flooding in these towns that you see are due to this overdevelopment of areas. So when it rains, the water has nowhere to go. It just gets washed down the streets and the gutters and flooded out, and a lot of times it floods a lot of the lower lying towns and cities that were built up. And we've seen this as recently as just a couple of years ago. Ellicott City gets flooded. They said it's a once in a century type flooding, but then they had another one a few years later. And I attribute a lot of that to just all of the building and construction and development that's going on around that city. Now the rainwater has no place to go, and they're supposed to do all of the planning. There's a lot of civil engineering that goes into developing areas, but ultimately there's going to be side effects to developing land that was not developed before. But and then there's overall environmental issues, right? That people can talk about or point to, which I can't get into because I'm not a scientist. But I can see events just like anyone else that are happening, and I think a lot of the cause of that is just overdevelopment of land. And I guess, I'm sorry, JM Carb, your question got cut off if I find it, but JM Carb says, I learned a lot from watching the stream, so thanks, you're welcome. I'm glad. I try to make the stream somewhat informative. Sometimes I just jibber jabber, but hopefully the things that I run into every week, well, that's enough about me. Not just from Rob, but from the live chat. Yes, the community here is awesome. I'm doing in-camera focus stacking with the EM5 III. Is there any, I don't know what the rest of that question is. Oh, here it is. Native flash like the FL700 as opposed to the Godox TT350, other than not having to set the delay time for the flash to recycle in the camera. So I guess the question is there any reason to buy a native Olympus flash versus a third-party flash? Because when you use a native flash, like the Olympus brand of flashes, it'll automatically sync to the flash's recycle time without you having to set it, right? I can't think of any. I mean, the only other very, very minor difference between flashes is in the color of the light. So just to be a little more specific, and I don't know how much work Olympus puts into it or any manufacturer, but the reason these third-party flashes work on various cameras, so you can buy Godox TT350, right? And then you can put it on a Fuji, you can put it on a Nikon, you can put it on any camera that they make it compatible with. But nothing changes about the flash other than the pinout or the firmware inside the flash. And the flash itself is identical, right? And the light being put out by the flash is going to be identical regardless of which camera you put it on. But flashes made by the manufacturer are calibrated to the camera's color science. So the flash has to output a certain color consistently. I mean, there's always variance, right? But the color from the flash has to come out consistently. So when you buy an Olympus branded flash, ideally Olympus and their engineers calibrated the flash color to the camera's color science. Just like if you buy a Nikon flash, it's calibrated to Nikon's color science and outputs a certain specific color. And it's very subtle, right? But it does come up. It has come up because the third-party flashes, all they do when you put the third-party flash onto the camera, it tells, it identifies itself as an Olympus flash or as a Nikon flash. So if you put a TT350 onto a Nikon camera, Nikon's going to think, oh, you just put on an SB700 or whatever. You know, I don't know what model they chose, probably the most generic baseline model, so that it's compatible with many Nikon, Olympus, Panasonic, whatever camera. So you put the TT350 on your Olympus or Panasonic camera, it identifies itself as that particular brand. So the camera thinks you've just put on an Olympus flash. And what's weird is Olympus and Panasonic use the same pinout, and you can interchange, just like the lenses, you can interchange the flash system. So I don't have to buy a separate flash system for my Panasonic cameras as I do for my Olympus camera. So I don't know exactly what flash is being identified as when you put it on to the camera. If it's identified as a Panasonic flash, but you can use it on Olympus or vice versa. I don't know why I'm getting into that, because it almost is meaningless with color correction and balancing that you can do in post-processing when you use flash anyway. But I know it's come up, and there are workarounds that you have to consider when you know there is a difference. Now, I don't have any Olympus original flashes to compare directly to show you, okay? Well, I do have the little tiny thing, but that doesn't count. But anyhow, that's another minor difference. Just like the flash sync, recycle sync thing is very, very minor. So he did shoot Micro Four Thirds. Also shot a Leica Velux. Yep, that's a Panasonic camera. Yep. Interesting. I didn't know that. I mean, it doesn't come up in any of his interviews because, again, the gear is doesn't matter. But and Apit's ad, I guess this might be part of a larger conversation, but you're torn between the 40 to 150 and the 100 to 400. But the deal helped me make up my mind. Okay. I don't know which one you decided to get. I can't tell from that statement. And Seraphin, I guess this is in response to Louise's question about if you do street photography angry, I'm more likely to get more people close-ups. When I'm in a good mood, I ask for portraits permission from interesting people. Okay. Yeah. I'd like to shoot some electronics close up. I think the design of circuit boards and things are very interesting. because we have a lot of straight lines and angles and geometry and circuitry that I find interesting. Wow, it's been a while. Yes, I am smiling. I knew it. I hope you're still here. I hope everyone's still here. Is it my 300? Yes, it does. I love my 300 millimeter. Expensive, right? But it was worth it. I actually haven't taken it out in about 2 months. I've been kind of focused on the 25 millimeter. And thank you, Louise. You and Robin bring many different and special traits to the table. And that's true, right, of everyone. Peter and Jimmy and Maddie. I really liked Maddie's recent video about the future of photography. Or he called it something, photography is dead. He did a great job on that video. So definitely check out Maddie's recent video. I really like that one. And I pretty much agree with everything he said. The Family Man. Wasn't that a movie? That was a good movie too, with Nicolas Cage. And Plato says we have that problem here too. A very large degree. They let people build everywhere. I know. Huge loss of natural environment and the consequence of wildlife and nature's developers do not care about building in a floodplain. Yeah, it's a little rough. And Darko says, you love the commercial real estate vid. Oh yeah, thank you. I had to cut that down. Man, when I laid the video down, it was actually about 40 minutes of video there. And I had to cut it down to just 14 minutes, right? Wow, thank you, Robin. Wow, that's very generous of you. You don't have to do that, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much. 30 ringgits. Copio for me. Awesome. Thank you, Robin. You guys are so generous. I mean, any donations I get, trust me, I really appreciate it. They help me more than you know. They support a lot of the gear that I buy and what I eat, actually. Well, not so much what I eat, but man, some of you donate monthly, like automatically, which is great. Even though I don't have a membership thing, you guys are some of you very consistent. Others, just randomly. And then other people, might be new to the channel. They really like the video I did. And that's what I like is, and this goes back to an earlier point made in the stream, is we all have our own voice, right? Whether it's Robin or Peter, Jimmy, Maddie, Emily, both Emilys, and a lot of the other guests I've had, Roberto on the channel. We all shoot, basically the same camera, more or less, right? And most of you have much more experience than I do, but we all have our own voice, is my point. And so when I come on and talk about my struggles about plateauing and my photography, it may connect with some people better than others, right? Because some people may not have the same challenges I am with their photography, or can't identify with why I'm struggling with a certain thing, right? Because generally speaking, I'm not an emotional person. It takes me a lot to even smile, to be honest. I can laugh at myself sometimes, but I envy people And I say this because when I'm around my family, uh, they're just laughing and being emotional about things that I found amusing, but I didn't laugh out loud, or I didn't start crying, or you know what I mean. I'm a little bit more neutral, and that's why, like I said, I've been accused of being a little bit robotic to people in my from people in my family that know me, uh, and very close friends that say I'm just this is like level, right? I like to say I'm level headed, but some people call me a robot. I don't know what this is about the trees going into a museum. This is interesting. Lots of issues using flash, so LED is always my go-to option. Yeah, if you can mount an LED light, I've done that a few times for not necessarily macro, but a small LED light sometimes is good enough, or even a flashlight. The quality of light from the LED can be important, right? Uh, so you want to use a high quality LED if you want to get serious about it, but any light will do. Any continuous lighting will do. Is sometimes preferable. And GB is here from Kansas. Awesome. Congratulations on your new OM1. It's a great camera. I mean, I've really enjoyed using it, and now it's kind of migrated to just my professional work now. I keep my bag. I'll show you. Like I have a photo job coming up next week, so I pre-packed my bag. It was supposed to be yesterday, but it got postponed to next week. But I keep this. This is basically what I shoot with. I have my OM1, and then underneath that, I have the backup camera, my EM5 Mark III, and then these two flashes, right, 8200 and a V1. They both have the round heads, so it's easy to adapt. I have some diffusers and things I can put on there, and this all packs up nicely into a one of my favorite bags ever. They don't sell these anymore. In the side pocket, I keep a backup radio trigger. So in case, because right now I use the one flash to radio trigger the other. But if one of the flashes fail, I can use that as a backup, and I'll just have to shoot with one flash for the rest of the thing. And that's it. And then the rest of the stuff, and then spare batteries and stuff in the side pockets. I'll show you what's in here. I have my Insta360. This got nothing to do with your new OM1, I know, but I just wanted to show you how I use it. Or not 360. This is the DJI Osmo. I do this for my drone shots. Spare battery. Spare memory cards. What else is in here? Spare battery for the EM5. And microphone. I've been bringing this microphone with me everywhere, just in case I want to take notes while I'm in the field. I've only done that once in 6 years, but I carry this with me anyway. Because sometimes when I get home, the kind of notes I take while I'm shooting a property is, I make notes of the overall feeling of the space. Is it a large space, a small space? Also, I make notes verbally of the color and the lighting that I'm seeing in the room. so that'll help me post-process. So I needed to record these notes earlier on, and because my processing skills weren't what they are today. My processing skills are good enough, and my technique, and I'm very consistent, so I don't really need to take notes anymore about the way the lighting is in the room and colors. But early on, I'd come back and I'd be like, why can't I get this color right? How am I going to balance this? Or, I used to like, why does this room look bigger or smaller than it is? What did you know what I mean? So I tried to take notes that way. But after a little while, it just got to where I had enough experience. I could look at a room and understand and visualize what it's going to look like in post-processing. So I don't really need to take notes, but I take it anyway, just in case. Maybe there's special. Now, there are special instructions sometimes, but I usually get those before I go. But a lot of times when I'm on site, the agent and or the owners will be there, and they'll give me special instructions about the property to shoot. And usually they want to show off a particular asset of the property, like it has dual garages, or it has a new HVAC system, or it has special outlets and equipment for the type of industry or whatever they're going to be doing, because I do mostly commercial property. But yeah, the OM1 is migrated to mostly just my commercial work, and then if I do any birding with the 300mm f4, it's really good for sports action wildlife. But outside of that, just my general photo walks, I'll take out one of my other cameras, like my Pen F. This is kind of my go-to default camera, like my everyday camera. But I also really like taking that Fuji X-T30 out. That's another camera that, I'm starting. Every camera has their own sort of charm to it, right? The X-T30, the colors are really interesting. I mean, I didn't care about the film simulation so much after I got the camera. I bought it because I wanted the film simulations. Then I took some pictures and I'm like, meh, the colors aren't all that. But it is a little bit different, than the Olympus colors. And my Panasonic S5, which I bought primarily for video work, the OM1 has replaced that now, so I don't need to carry two cameras anymore, right? One for video, one for photography, because the OM1 has now replaced it. The video's, I would say, more than adequate. Whereas the EM1 Mark III, the video was just barely adequate, and then sometimes inadequate for the kind of videos that I was shooting. But now the OM1 is fine. I get nice, clean, crisp, sharp images. I get decent dynamic range. I wish it was 10-bit color, because I do color grade the images, and having that extra couple of bits, I've noticed that it's very subtle. Again, it's very subtle. No client is ever going to notice, but I notice when I'm grading my images in post. I feel like the 8-bit color is just not quite there. But for the kind of properties that I shoot, it's not that critical. The color's not that important. It doesn't have to be spot on. But, I have a few videos for the OM1, best settings for a beginner if you're a beginning photographer, and then a bunch of other stuff. I mean, I'll try and make some more. I got another video I want to make about spot metering, which is kind of interesting. And the behavior of spot metering, it may not be what you expected. There's definitely some caveats to spot metering, believe it or not, with the OM1. And then, hello, Roger Oman. Any undiscovered abilities you think you didn't find in it yet? How's the LUT making? Okay, so No, there's nothing that it does that I wasn't expecting. I mean, we were told ahead of time it was going to have subject detect. What I didn't, what I was hoping and panned out was that the bird detect is really good. The other subjects I haven't really tried so much because I shoot birds, but for bird detect, it's really good with all the same caveats of autofocus. You have to be careful of things in front of the bird because even though it locks onto the bird, it may not focus on the bird. It'll focus on the object directly in front, like a branch sticking in front of the bird. So there's little things like that, but no, nothing undiscovered as of yet. Because a lot of the features were carried over from the EM1 Mark III. All they did was improve on it in a lot of ways. How's the LUT making? The LUT making, well, I don't make my own LUTs, but I use the LUT that Olympus gave. So we can take the 4K 10-bit video, apply the Olympus LUT for the OM1, and that'll give me a Rec 709 color space. And then I can grade it slightly more from there because I have, underlying the LUT is the original 10-bit image. And so I'm having no issues really with color. I had to learn how to use DaVinci, like using the DaVinci color managed space and understanding gamma 2.2 versus 2.4 and a lot of nuances to video work, right? I mean, it's not that different from photography work in terms of the learning curve, because in photography there's that learning curve of post processing, right? Highlights, shadows, dynamic range, all those things. But then video work, you deal with a lot of the same issues with dynamic range, highlights, shadows, but how you approach them is different because you're working with vector scopes, maybe parades, maybe the other thing, if you're doing people, you have to worry about the skin tones. So you have a different kind of scope for that. I don't do any of that, but the color wheels are different in DaVinci Resolve. Working with color is very different. So there's a learning curve there in grading video, and it's I wouldn't say it's any more steep than doing photography, but it's almost like starting from scratch, right? When dealing with video work. Because video is motion, right? And the scene and the colors are changing constantly throughout the video. So you have to balance from scene to scene the white balance and the colors and the lighting constantly. So you have tools to help you do that. Whereas in photography, you have a static scene, right? So you can work with global tools, you can work with masking, you can do a lot more additional things in photography that you can't do with video work. Like there is masking to some extent, and AI is helping with a lot of that. But anyway, long story short, I'm not finding anything in the OM1 that I couldn't do except for the bird tracking that I couldn't do with the EM1, and it's just a faster, better camera, and it's a significant upgrade in terms of usability with the new menu system. The higher resolution EVF is definitely a big plus. Even though I don't use the EVF much in my paid work, I mostly just on a tripod using the live view. But the live view itself has also been upgraded, and the controls and everything. So I like it's a very significant upgrade from the M1 Mark III. Unlike the M1 Mark II to the M1 Mark III, is more is a much smaller upgrade. Wasn't that much difference between the two cameras. Except the autofocus. Autofocus was much better on the EM1 Mark III than the EM1 Mark II in terms of face detect. But the OM1, yeah, it's pretty awesome. Okay. You get called a robot all the time, so you know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, it's ironic, right? Somebody calls you a robot, then your feelings get hurt. That's ironic, isn't it? Anyway, and not Alanis Morissette ironic, but really ironic. And John says, I purchased the Panasonic 9mm f1.7. I hope it'll replace a bunch of other issues that I'll be selling, a bunch of other lenses that I'll be selling. I've been waiting a long time for that. Really? Interesting. I mean, it makes sense because when you're shooting wide angle, you don't necessarily need a zoom, right? Wide angle. Usually you're shooting wide open all the time. Like my Panasonic 7-14, I rarely shoot beyond 7mm when I'm doing my property work. And for when I'm doing street, I rarely shoot, 14mm. Like that 14mm would be my choice if I was using that lens. I never use that lens for street, but I did take it out one time and I found myself using 14mm more than 7. And it's an f4, so you lose a lot of light too. And Roberto Carlos Garcia, my gosh, you've been with me a long time on the channel. That's awesome. Good to see you. Do I use profiles in LUTs? No, I just use the standard Rec 709 LUT, and then I grade myself from there, because the property videos that I do have to be relatively color accurate and pleasing to the eye in the sense of lighting. So I don't have to get too fancy with LUTs and profiles and things like that when I do video work. Now for my personal video, like when I'm vlogging and stuff, again, I just put everything on auto. I don't really get into changing the look of a video. I'm not a video producer, or I'm not making videos for entertainment, so to speak, where, using LUTs and profiles to apply a certain specific mood or feeling from color would make a difference, right? So it's not something I do. And System Mature says, my general camera is the M1 Mark III and G9 and Panasonic 8-18 and 12-35 and Ollie 40-150. Yeah, that's a good setup. I still want to get a G9 one day. I just think it's an excellent camera. That would be just fun to have and use. If Panasonic wants to send me one, just email me. I'll give you my address. And Plato says, I shot with my old Canon 5D3 on Sunday. Colors seem overly vibrant, especially the reds, almost aggressive compared to Ollie, used to the natural profile. Yeah, it's interesting when you switch cameras. You can definitely see a difference in the color science, right? When you're talking about just straight out of camera and you don't do any processing. Lawrence says, Fujifilm seems to be testing the water on controls on their cameras, with some still having the old film days control knobs and others going with the norm. Sensor all X trends, yes. And there's been some controversy over that, right? Some people have been saying that Fuji's losing its way because they went away from the traditional manual dials on the top of the camera. Oh my God, you guys would laugh so hard. I spent about an hour trying to figure out on the Fujifilm X-T30 how to do double exposures. And I watched all these videos. I was watching and I went into the manual and I could not find it. I couldn't find it in the manual. Even though the manual tells you exactly where it is, for some reason I was reading it and it just didn't click with me that the double exposure is on the shutter mode dial. It's actually a physical dial on the top of the camera you turn to take double exposures. And the video, I watched about 3 or 4 videos on how to do double exposure with the Fuji film, and they never showed you turning the dial to double exposure mode. I'm like, how stupid is that? How can you make a tutorial on double exposure and at least not show how to put the camera into double exposure mode? They just got right into it. Do this, do that. They talked about after the camera's in double exposure mode. And I'm like, this is why I would be the perfect audience for my own videos, because I don't do that. I show you every dial and button to much. I mean, some people are bored to tears on my videos, right? They can't handle it. But other people are like, thank God you showed me where that button was, right? Or where the dial is, or what button to push. Because I try to be very thorough. Like, I just make an assumption. You have no idea what a camera is, and I got to show you from almost scratch, where to put the memory card in or how to turn the camera on, things like that, right? And when I'm watching these other tutorials, I'm like, oh my God, this got tens of thousands of views and, equivalent number of likes. And I'm like, why would anybody that knows nothing about a camera be able to follow what the heck you're doing? How? Anyhow, so I was a little bit anxious about my style of teaching for my videos, because they're always really long and they are a bit dry and monotone, but I try not to skip any steps, right? And the videos are doing well overall, the ones where I do tutorials and things, like even my OM1 best settings for beginners, right? That video, it's pretty long-winded, but if you've never picked up an OM1 before, I think if you watch that video, you'll get a pretty good feel of, how to take pictures with it, at least, right? And that's like my number one. Well, the birds in flight one is my number one, but that's like one of my top OM1 videos is best settings for beginners. And I literally show you how to turn the camera on in that video. That's how basic it is. Because I don't make any assumption that you know anything about a camera when making my tutorials. So yeah, I spent wasted an hour, because I get it. Even though the manual tells you exactly how to do it, it was after about an hour of looking at the manual, watching the videos, looking at the camera, then I finally figured out it's on the GD dial right there on the shutter mode dial, which makes no sense to me, because as an Olympus user forever, it's always in the menu. Why isn't multiple exposure in the menu? Why is it on a dial? Like, you think, because multiple exposure is not like a common thing. I mean, it takes, most people just take 2 pictures and do it in post. Not many people do it in camera, so why would you waste a spot on a dial for that? But at the same time, what better place than right there on the dial, right? Instead of having to menu dive. So but it just goes to show you, I got a little bit of feel. I mean, this is how I felt when I first started photography. Was, it's very and even though I'm kind of a nerd and very savvy with electronics, working with cameras was relatively new thing, and it took me some time, but just last week I was just dumbfounded how to do multiple exposure on a Fuji film. And you wouldn't expect that from me. I mean, no, I guarantee, none of you would have guessed, I would have struggled for an hour to figure out how to do multiple exposure on a Fuji. So I'm going to do a video on it. On on a Fuji X-T30. This is how you do a GD multiple exposure on a Fujifilm camera. You turn the dial right here. It'll be like a 30-second video, but it'll supplement the 3 or 4 videos, and there's probably a lot more that I watched. There's not many videos on multiple exposure for Fujifilm, but there's definitely none that I could find that would explain that to me. And I can do it in 30 seconds. Because I can't believe I read the manual and it told me exactly where it is, and I still couldn't figure it out. I don't know where my brain was when I was reading the manual. That said, the wording was, it didn't have a picture or anything, right? It just had wording that the double exposure setting is on the shutter mode dial. And I read that, and it still didn't click to me that it's on the shutter mode dial because there was no picture. Oh, just stupid things. Stupid. That's an hour of my life I'm not going to get back. And Signature says, my option for bird photos, without a doubt, the OMP1 camera and the 150 to 400 Pro lens. Super combination. I have to save money and go out without a lot. Normal life active. Yes. The 150 to 400. I know Jimmy Chang wants that lens bad. Hopefully his business picked up enough he can go out and get one now. Because that lens came out just when everything else, business went to crap. And what are LUTs? Well, LUT, L-U-T, stands for lookup table. And what it does is it just looks up. It's like a preset in photo editing, right? You load a preset that changes the color, the contrast, it's a preset, basically. That's all. It stands for lookup table. But it's for video. So in video, they call it lookup tables because, like I said, there's a lot of settings in video. They should have just called it lookup table in photo editing software. Why not? But photo editing probably came out before video software was prevalent. So video differentiated itself and called, I don't know why they call it LUTs, lookup tables, but it looks up values for individual settings. And what's nice about LUTs, though, is that the LUTs generally can work with any photo editing software. Because when you download a LUT, which is basically a preset for video, you don't have to, it's not specific to any software. You can use that LUT. I can use the LUT in Adobe Premiere. I can use the LUT in DaVinci Resolve, the same LUT. I don't have to have the specific software. So it's more universal lookup. It's a more universal preset than, say, a preset for Lightroom or OM Workspace. The presets are very specific to the software. So that's the biggest difference that I found. Lauren said, I've been using the GX9 and Canon RP mostly these days, though I should take out my M10 Mark II again with the 45. Yeah. So I got my 45 attached to my Pen F because, like I said, I saw in the video that Saul Leiter shot, basically 90 millimeters. So I'm going to try and duplicate that, just mimic what he's doing and get a feel for his photography. I just, I'm very good at copying things, but I need to be able to expand on that. And anyway, I talk too much about that already. Yeah, if it were only twice, I feel like we're taxed constantly, more than twice. You must think, yes, I don't like the looks of the Fuji. And it was that, let me just pull it out. So so here's the Fuji, right? Um, People praise it, for its nostalgic looks, but honestly, to me, this is like one of the ugliest cameras ever made. I mean, I'm exaggerating. It's not one of the ugliest, but it's not attractive to me at all. And when I went out and bought my first Micro Four Thirds camera, I had the Fuji X-T10 and the EM10 Mark II side by side, and I picked the EM10 Mark II strictly for its looks because I was already shooting with a D750, a full frame back then. So I didn't care about sensor size, nothing. I wanted something small, compact, and light that took decent pictures. And I knew nothing about Micro Four Thirds or APS-C cameras, really, other than Nikon. I was very familiar with Nikon at the time. But Nikon, I don't think at the time Nikon made a APS-C mirrorless camera, but Fuji did, and Olympus did. Olympus made the Micro Four Thirds mirrorless. So they were small and compact, right? So I bought the M10 over this. So if I had liked how this looks, it's all subjective. If I had liked how this looked better than the Olympus, I might be a Fuji shooter right now, primarily versus an Olympus shooter. I mean, it's just little things like that, right? That can change the whole direction of your life. In this case, I am now an Olympus shooter rather than a Fuji shooter. Now, don't get me wrong. This is small and compact and light. I mean, when I put it next to my Pen F, the Fuji is actually a little bit smaller than my Pen F. And, but man, I mean, again, it's subjective, but you can't compare the looks of this with this. I mean, rangefinder versus, DSLR style aside, there's no comparison in how these two look, in my opinion. The Pen F is just gorgeous by comparison. Makes this the ugly duckling, right? But I like this camera a lot more since I got the 35 millimeter lens for it, which is a 50 equivalent. And it's kind of what's turned me on to shooting at a 50 millimeter equivalent. Not because of the Fuji, but when I was shooting with this, it just reinforced my feeling that I really liked the 50 millimeter equivalent over the 17 or the 35 millimeter equivalent. Because I was a long time lover of the 17 millimeter for Olympus, and I still like it, but I prefer the 50 millimeter focal length right now. I feel like it gives me a little bit more depth to my images and a little more compression that you don't get with a 17. The 17 just captures everything, which, is why a lot of street photographers like it. You capture the environment, yada, yada, but you never have that sense of depth that you would with a 50. So I like it. Anyhow, so I like this camera a lot more now that I got because I have the whatever kit lens came with it, the f2.8 to f4. I think it's an 18 to 55, which was supposedly a decent kit lens. But I didn't like it. It was kind of bulky and heavy, and the images were just, I didn't feel like they were tack sharp. They were definitely a little bit soft, in my opinion. Whereas this 35 f2, plenty of light at f2 and tack sharp. I mean, this is really, really a sharp lens. And then when you combine that with the Fuji colors, maybe that's why I like the colors more now, because I'm not distracted by how unsharp the kit lens was. Now I can just look at the image and appreciate the colors rather than being distracted by how ridiculous bad the kit lens is for this. That might be it. I just realized that might be why. Maybe not, but and just by the way, multiple exposures is on this dial here on the top. I don't know why. I couldn't find that. I should, if it had a lock on it, I'd lock it right now to multiple exposure, just to remind me that when I want to shoot in regular, I have to unlock it to go shoot like aperture priority or something. Well, this is not even aperture priority. This is not a PASM dial. This is the shutter mode dial, which I'm not used to. It's a very different way of working with the camera than my Olympus cameras. It has an exposure comp dial here. Man, and this thing underexposes like crazy. I have to add in like a +1 EV on almost all my shots. So I got to figure out what the problem is. If it's me or if there's some setting I have wrong in the camera. But I feel like this camera is way underexposed, at least by stop. In fact, I just turned it. I had it at 1 2/3 stop when I picked the camera up. I can't figure, I don't know why. Oh man, it's been on this whole time. Okay, there's no battery in it anyway. But and this red button here on top didn't come with it. That's the only thing that saved this from being a totally meh camera in terms of cosmetics. Is this little red button I added. I think just gives it a little bit of bling. So I'm not totally like, because a camera has to inspire you too, at least for me. A beautiful camera definitely inspires me to go out and shoot, like my Hasselblad. I haven't taken this out in a while, but whenever I look at this, I'm like, man, I need to go out and shoot with this. I'm like, I want to go. I end up picking up my Pen F instead, but because I think about developing and processing the film, but because you have to develop it, then scan it, then process it. It's like a much more difficult process versus a lot of the things with the Pen F I can use straight out of camera, right? Just use the JPEG and I'm good. Let's see. Yeah, it is difficult switching up camera controls. I mean, the subtle differences on the EM1s versus the EM10s, even a small change like that, the controls are a little bit different, can be a little awkward. I'm not a fan of the menu button being on the left side of the camera. I wish they'd have kept it on the right side, because every other camera I have except my EM1 and my OM1, the menu button's on the right side. But they put the menu button on the left side. I don't like that change. And Fuji has messed everything up. They changed all the dials on top, right? They added a mode dial and they got rid of the shutter dial and whatever else. I'm not that familiar with Fuji, but I can see where some Fuji fans were a little bit upset because that's not a minor thing like moving a menu button. That's like changing the whole camera. But you get used to it. Yeah. Oh, Jan is here. Hi, Jan. And Marcel. Oh, my goodness. Fuji needs a Rob robot urgently of Robin Wong. It's been a while, Marcel. How you doing? Since I've seen you in a stream, I know you check out my Instagram all the time, but it's been a while since I've seen you in a stream. And I see. Yeah, it took you a long time to figure out focus distance for preset manual. Yeah, I think it was probably you that emailed me. Someone emailed me about doing a video on focus distance and using the preset manual focus. Unless Robin or Peter or Jimmy or someone does it before I do, that's fine. It's all about the community, right? And I consider, everyone in my community, including the other creators, anything we can do to help each other out, right? Why not? Yes. I think you meant when Olympus creates a JPEG, does it use an optical correction similar to DxO's? Yes, it does. It's not exactly the same. DxO somehow does better than even the Olympus in-camera profile. I don't know why, but I did find the lines straighter and a little bit. I'll have to do. I mean, it's such a small difference that it's hardly worth making a whole video about, uh, or even including it in a video as a side note. But it is different, slightly, time to time. And my gut feeling says the DxO does a better job even than the Olympus in camera optical corrections. Yeah, EM10 Mark II and the 45, excellent combination. 100% agree. Hey, yeah, Robin's with me on the 50 millimeter. Yeah, it's really good. I know you don't like the 40, and I get that. I mean, between 40 and 50, it's so close. I wouldn't know if I would say I hate the 40, and I didn't. Well, I don't know if you hate the 40. I know you didn't keep. You're not a big 40 millimeter fan anyway, but 50 millimeter definitely, Robin. It's. I'm definitely really digging that focal length. That's why I'm seriously looking at the 25 millimeter f2. I mean, I really need a new monitor than I do a lens, but a lens, I don't know. I'm still paying off my OM1. I got about 900 bucks left I have to pay off on the OM1. Hopefully after I got one more photo job next week, that should be about 300 bucks. Then I'll have just enough to pay off my OM1. And then I need to finish. I know it's been 4 months, almost 5 now, and I still haven't paid that thing off. It's rough. Let's see. I'm almost caught up here, I think. Oh, the Great Vanzini. My goodness, another long-time viewer here. I'm not using any of my Fujis lately. Focusing drives me nuts. I didn't really. My XT30 focus is fine. It's not as good as my EM1s. But I would say it's pretty on par with the EM10s and the Pen F. Pretty close. I know the continuous shutter is pretty bad. I mean, I didn't have much luck with that. I'll never be able to shoot my dog Ellie running around with it, but for just static shots, click, 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 I haven't had any problems with it. And then Jan says, if you ever know how to map a button for locking white balance when on auto white balance on the XT20, let me know. Oh, man. Yeah. Locking white balance. That's interesting. I don't do that even on my Olympus cameras. I know you can select white balance. I have to give that some thought because I am experimenting a little bit with white balance on my Pen F, where I'm selecting cloudy white balance, then shifting the amber and magenta or amber and green dials ±2, and then dialing in some color. I got a battery in here I could just show you. No, it's no battery, but I'm experimenting a little bit with the color dial and stuff to try to get a more filmic, pastel-y kind of look, kind of like Kodak Portra. But I'm not having much success. The thing is, the Pen F, I like being able to adjust the saturation. Oh, excuse me. Crap. I like being able to adjust the saturation and things, but they need to add a wheel for hue and luminance, just like you have an Olympus workspace. So basically, you'll have virtually a full-on editor built into the camera. But if they could add those two things, you could definitely get much more interesting colors and looks out of the camera than just being able to adjust saturation. And I don't see why that would be hard to do. Like, why couldn't you do that just in a firmware update? That would be nice. I mean, I doubt it'll ever happen unless they come up with a Pen F2. Olympus should or OM Systems should contact me to talk about the new new Pen F2 and what we should do. Like if we can get one of their techs to come on or marketing reps, whoever, to come on to a live stream and talk with the viewers about the Pen F, that would be awesome. And get feedback directly. I don't know how they get feedback now, but that would be my input, my 2 cents. Add hue and luminance to the color wheel. And Seth has a question. Have you tried spot highlight exposure setting? I've tried it while shooting in Jazz Club the other day. Could not figure it out. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of using spot highlight, spot shadow, right? The idea being is, and I always get it backwards, but if you shoot spot highlights, it tries to preserve the highlights, so it's going to crush the blacks, right? It's going to underexpose the shot to preserve the highlights wherever you have your spot, right? And then spot shadow, I believe, is the opposite. It tries to bring the shadows up, and it's going to blow out the highlights. And usually it's about 2 stops. Sometimes it's 3 stops. It'll adjust the exposure, but it's going to adjust the exposure at least 2 stops, maybe 3 stops, depending on the dynamic range of the scene. For me, it's much easier to just dial in exposure comp ±1, ±2, rather than dealing with the spot metering, which is not consistent. It's going to dynamically try to adjust highlights and shadows depending if you're using spot high or spot low, or spot high or spot shadow, I should say. It's not consistent. The results are not consistent. And I'm actually building up some images to demonstrate this in a video about spot metering. And I wouldn't use it personally. I don't find it very useful. So just use exposure comp, and you have to work, that's the best way to do it. If you want to adjust for highlights, you spot meter on a highlight, and then you add in a +1 EV to balance out the exposure. Or if you really want to, save the highlights, you dial in a negative EV, 1 stop or 2 stops in some cases, even when you're spot metering. And then use the EV meter in the camera to judge how much you need to adjust, and or the histogram. The histogram is not quite as reliable either, but it's definitely, you can get more consistent results if you do it yourself manually using exposure comp rather than using the spot highlight, spot shadow function. Because you're using spot highlights, which means you're trying to, so what was happening was, the players and the band and people in the audience were all way underexposed when you were doing that. Yeah, and that's not going to fly. Okay. I have not noticed any difference in autofocus or tracking, not at all, personally. And I don't know. I don't think and we're talking about the firmware update for the OM1, I assume, right? I haven't noticed any difference. I mean, I haven't tested for it, and I would have had to had a testing methodology set up from the beginning so that as changes are made to the firmware, I can use the same methodology to determine if there's any difference. So even if there is an improvement, there's no way for me to verify that, unfortunately, because I don't have the testing methodology set up for it. But in just day-to-day use, no difference. You're gonna bring your with Jimmy. You live out there near Jimmy. That's cool. That's cool that you guys can hang out. Sell the food. I'm not selling my Fuji film. It's unused gear. The only thing really unused right now is the M1 Mark III. So that's going to go soon. But everything else is so little value. I don't see the point in selling it. Like I was going to sell some of my Minolta film cameras. Trade-in value, if they'll even take it, is like $2. Some things. What light? I don't know. I'm not very good at product photography because you're talking about basically product photography, but dishes are very reflective, right? So you have to be very, very conscious of how you light them so that you don't get, highlights blown, you don't get reflections of the lighting setup. If you look at a lot of product photography online of shiny objects, like silverware and trophies, the very best examples, you don't know how it was lit, and you can't look at the image and say this is how they lit it up. Some trophy things and silverware, I can look at the reflections and I can see they got two big soft boxes here, or I can see they used a light box with a little slit in the top where the flash is coming in and illuminating it that way, or at least one of the ways they're illuminating. I can look at an image usually, but some of the very best ones, I have no idea how they lit that thing up without being able to identify how they lit it, So I'm the wrong person. You'll have to watch videos on product photography for shiny objects, and that would be my advice to you, is to go look at those kinds of tutorials, because I'm at a loss how they do some of the photography for these very shiny objects like dishes and plates are one example. I mean, I haven't looked at dishes and plates for photography, but when I look at other things, and I imagine dishes and plates would be the same, that's tough to do. So I don't have a recommendation specifically. 7 months left, huh? Man. Oh, I know. Jeff Painter's here. Good to see you. And then John says, I really like the portrait look for portraits. The colors are subdued, but not too, yes. They're a little subdued and they're a little pastel-y sometimes, right? So they make for interesting street photography, I think. I think it's just an interesting look. I mean, it's not for everyone though, definitely. And portrait is, the what's the word? Well, anyway, the name itself is derived from the word portrait or port. And Jan says, I don't do it with my Olympus either, but I find it would be very useful with my Fuji, as it tends to make weird things and go from beautiful white balance to horrendous. Setting Kelvin isn't as good. Yes. Okay. Interesting. I'll have to give that some thought next time I go out with my Fuji. Maybe I'll take it out today if I get some time. And Justin Dolby, thank you. Justin Dolby. I need to do some That's definitely an area of photography that oh crap. Let's just look him up real quick and then Justin Dolby. Okay, did I spell that right? Okay, we need to be more specific. I'm not seeing it. If you could give me a search term that would help me find him, that would be helpful, Ken. I don't see it. Maybe if I take the word off, take product out. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ken. I don't see it. I intend to keep. Whoops. I intend to keep both my EM1 Mark III cameras even after buying the OM1. Not only a good backup, it's still an excellent for wildlife, macro, and street. Nothing to sell right now. I thought about that because right now my EM5 Mark III is my backup camera for my paid work, but the EM1 Mark III is probably a better backup camera than the EM1 Mark III, specifically because it has really good battery life and it has the custom mode dials that I use a lot in my paid work. But the EM5 Mark III doesn't have any trade-in value to speak of. Whereas the M1 Mark III has a double the trade-in value as the M1 Mark III. So I'm sort of leaning towards the M1 Mark III going. I mean, I guess I don't have to get rid of anything. I just have to wait a little bit longer to buy the 25, which is fine. I mean, I don't need it. I got the 25 f1.8, which is excellent. But anyhow, I'm with you, though. I understand totally. It might be Dustin Dolby. Let me try that. All right, this might be the guy, even though he's not using his name on his channel. But he's coming up under the search term Dustin Dolby. So if I select it, just so let's see if he put his name in any of the keywords or anything. He did not. It's an educational photography channel, so that may not be it. Dustin Dolby. Here we go. This is him. So that's what he looks like, but does he have his own channel? Let's look here. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Yeah, there's his channel. Okay. We got him. You got it. Dustin Dolby. All right. So let me share that in the chat section here. All right. I think it was Gigafish or Gigascope was asking about this. Thank you, GB, for following up on that. That's him, though. Okay, very good. Yeah, this looks like good stuff. 94,000 subscribers. Holy crap. He's really close to that 100K and getting that silver. Let me help him out here. We'll subscribe. We'll get him one more closer to that 100,000 mark. That'd be awesome. Yeah, Giga Colorscapes. That's sorry. You changed your name, your screen name. So all right. I'm gonna call it here. My voice is getting a little bit hoarse. And I need to eat. I'm getting hungry. So I want to thank all you guys for coming in today. I had a great time. Hopefully you did too. And I'll be back, I think, on Sunday. I might go to do some photography Sunday. But I'll try and be here on Sunday at my normal time. And that's it, right? I guess you can't see me. So thanks again for being here. I'll see you guys in the next one. This is my signature go, right? Leave, like exit now. What do you guys think? I don't know. This is stupid, right? I saw this from, I think it was Paul Newman used to do that. He walks onto a stage and you go like this. If you guys know who Paul Newman is. But either way, I'll see you guys next time.